Welcome everyone to the Lo-Fi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe, and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. The news, fresh off the press. Source, AP News International. Ukraine approves legislation in a bid for IMF aid. The International Monetary Fund had pledged $8 billion to help the Ukrainian economy, with 2 conditions attached. 1, the government must open up farmland for Ukrainian citizens to purchase. And 2, a banking law must be passed to stop previous bank owners from receiving government funds for banks that were sold or nationalized. Both of these conditions have now been met. The implications. The Ukrainian economy has been suffering for years. In addition to political crises starting in 2014 with mass protests that ousted the president, the annexation of Crimea, and the continuing war in eastern Ukraine. This $8 billion from the IMF would greatly help the country. However, a question for Lo-Fi Poli Sci students. The IMF and the World Bank, both Western-dominated institutions, seem to always put stipulations and requirements on governments before giving aid. Is this an example of forced surrendering of a state's sovereignty, or simply the cost of doing business today? Write in and let me know your thoughts. Next up, source, New York Times, Asia Pacific. Singapore's top court upholds law criminalizing gay sex. The law in question criminalizes sex taking place between males. The court ruling stated that even though the law is rarely enforced, it was still representative of the beliefs of the population of Singapore. The implications. As also reported by the BBC, there are about 70 countries in the world that still have laws such as this one. To put that in comparative perspective, there are currently about 200 countries in the world, meaning about 65% of the countries in the world have done away with such laws. This brings up an important question for students of Lo-Fi Poli Sci. If much of the world seems to be going in one direction, does that imply that the rest of the world should follow suit? Are universal human rights really universal? The answer to that question has huge implications for how we view the world. Our following story. Source, Reporters Without Borders. Section, News. Mexico. Woman journalist gunned down in Mexico's Veracruz state. Maria Hernandez was murdered this week by masked gunmen. Ms. Hernandez covered controversial and important topics, such as kidnappings that, in some cases, were linked to local police. The implications. Reporters Without Borders documented 10 Mexican journalists murdered last year in connection with their reporting, and ranked Mexico 144 out of 180 countries in media freedom worldwide. The country is considered one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. If you value the free reporting of publications of global news, so that we better understand the world in which we live, this story is important to you. And now for our headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, Washington Post, World Section, Africa. U.S. again accused of killing civilians in Somali airstrikes. This comes from a report done by Amnesty International discussing the level of accountability for the U.S.'s unbiased attacks and casualties on civilian populations when targeting terrorist or enemy combatants. Recent civilian casualties in 2 attacks in Somalia in February bring this issue to light again. The background and the implications of this story. Drone attacks and civilian casualties are not new with the current U.S. administration, but rather started almost immediately after the U.S. began the drone strike program in previous administrations. For years, civilian casualties have been described as a tragic byproduct of trying to make the country and world safer from those who would do more harm. Regardless of your view on the issue, human beings abound agree that the loss of innocent life is tragic, for whatever reason. The question to Lo-Fi Poli Sci students: what, if anything, can be done to save these innocent lives in the future? We, as human beings, are innovators, creators. Surely together, we can come up with a way to save lives. Write in and let me know your thoughts. And a last piece of news from the BBC, Science. Hungry black hole may be cosmic missing link. That's right, folks. Black holes have an appetite for shiny things. Stars. And now astronomers have finally found evidence of intermediate mass black holes. In contrast to black holes that most of us have already heard of, which typically lie in the center of galaxies, intermediate black holes are smaller in size, and this one lies on the edge of a galaxy. The implications. Black holes are massive centers of gravity that shape movement in the cosmos. This new discovery lets scientists know more about the different directions that stars move, and what's causing stars to move in those particular directions. Why is this important? In life, we find ourselves always pulled in one direction or another, sometimes for reasons that we don't know. It's only when we know why we move in the direction that we move, that we can begin to choose for ourselves our own path forward. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Let me say thank you for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.